welcome on behalf of the Rothman Institute, the Silberman College of Business, and Fairleigh Dickinson. We're delighted to have you here today. This is our 7th annual CEO Innovation Lecture, and we are delighted to have a distinguished speaker here today. Thank you for coming out on this foggy, muggy day. We'll take this over snow anytime. And I'd just like to, say we can't do what we do, as you all know, and many of you partners are in the room today, without the corporate community and the professional community. It's this relationship, this strong relationship that makes what we do possible and effective. So I'd like to just thank McKinsey & Company and Warburg Pincus for helping make today's seminar possible. So without further ado, let me introduce our provost, Dr. Peter Woolley, to give an introduction for our speaker. Peter Woolley.
I'm always delighted to have an event for the Silberman College of Business and for the Rothman Institute on this campus, in this building, and in this room. And the reason is because this room and this building and this estate were paid for by one of the greatest entrepreneurs ever. And that was a guy named Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelius Vanderbilt amassed a fortune in the 19th century that, when he died, was the largest fortune of any American and quite possibly the largest fortune of any private citizen in the world at that time. That was $105 million in 1877 dollars. But that meant that his fortune was 1/87th of the entire GNP of the United States. Not bad. So I say to people, especially people in a business college, you see, you're right, trickle-down theory works. Here we are in this fabulous estate paid for by a spectacular entrepreneur. And just as when this estate was built, it was a gift. It was a gift to a granddaughter of Cornelius, Florence Vanderbilt. It was a gift on the occasion of her wedding. And of course, they used only the best. They used the best architects, Kim, Mead, and White. They used only the best landscaper, who was Frederick Law Olmsted. And we, at Fairleigh Dickinson University now, we continue a tradition of excellence on this estate, the estate known as Florin. The tradition of excellence includes, among many things, the Words and Music Festival, which brings together on this campus artists who have never performed together to recombine and do something completely new, an innovation. For example, the Poet Laureate of the United States reading his own work to a jazz trio which is improvising at the same time. If you haven't seen it, you haven't lived. We have the University Press, which puts out 35 to 40 scholarly titles a year. We have the Literary Review, which is internationally read, 4 of whose contributors last year won Guggenheim Awards. We have a brand new School of Pharmacy, the first to be opened in New Jersey in 120 years. And not least at all, we have the Rothman Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies. So in the spirit of Cornelius Vanderbilt, we're pleased to bring you Brent Saunders, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Bausch Lomb, the leading global eye health company. In his 2 years plus with that company, he has led a profound transformation of the 160-year-old company that was founded in the days of Cornelius Vanderbilt. One of the biggest drivers of this transformation has been the culture of innovation that Brent and his leadership team have created that has rejuvenated both the company's product pipeline and the way it serves its customers. Brent serves on the board of directors of Forest Laboratories and the Overlook Foundation. He is a member of Avid Med, the Business Council, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's Upstate Regional Advisory Board. And most important, since I am a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, I'll point out he also is an alum of Pittsburgh and a member of the university's Board of Trustees. We are privileged to have him with us this morning, and I and Cornelius Vanderbilt salute him. Ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Well, thank you, Provost. That was a very kind introduction. And I have to say, by coincidence, the last book I just completed was the biography of Mr. Vanderbilt. And it really was a man who I think it really embodied what it means to be innovative and did some amazing things in his day for this country and for transportation and other industries as well. So I'm honored to be here to offer the 7th annual CEO Innovation Lecture. As you know, Fairleigh Dickinson has had a very distinguished list of speakers for this lecture in past years. So I thank you for inviting me and making me feel so welcome this morning. I would also like to thank Warburg Pincus and McKinsey & Company for their very generous support of today's program. So my subject this morning is innovation, and it's something I have spent much of my career thinking about. It's hard to be a CEO in any business today and not be thinking about innovation. We live in relatively slow growth here in the United States, and fiscal and social challenges are facing every aspect of our economy. So we simply can't stop thinking about innovation. Innovation has always been the most proven formula for expanding business, creating jobs, and changing the ways we both work and live. So let me start with what may seem like an obvious question. What is innovation? If you ask most people to define innovation, they'd probably come up with a list of breakthrough products. It could be the light bulb, the internal combustion engine, penicillin, the internet, or even hybrid cars. And they'd be right. These are all great pioneering innovations that have had huge implications on business and society. But today I'd like to talk about innovation in a different way. Breakthrough innovations like the electric light bulb and the internet are important, of course. But I don't believe innovation can only be found in what you may call that eureka moment, a sudden breakthrough or discovery, or a light bulb going off in your head. More often, innovation is about how people come together to create new ways of changing the status quo. Innovation is how you go from doing things a traditional way to doing things in a different way. And in my experience, that kind of shift doesn't just happen by itself. That kind of innovation takes a certain culture, a mindset. That kind of innovation requires the right incentives. That kind of innovation requires the right talent. So I think of innovation as a very simple formula. Talent plus culture plus incentives equals innovation. You can't simply wish for and even plan for innovation. As a leader, you have to drive innovation by instilling a culture and incentives to allow talented people to accomplish more than they believe possible. So where do you find this innovation formula being put to use today? Let's start with the most obvious answer, Silicon Valley. Many industries can claim to be at the forefront of innovation, but it would be hard to argue against information technology being the most innovative of them all. The impact of information technology in our lives and businesses has been staggering. Whether you're talking about two guys building the first personal computer in a garage, or the hundreds of engineers who just launched Google's high-speed fiber service in Kansas City, the formula is always the same. Talent, culture, and the right incentives made these breakthrough innovations possible. So where else do we see this formula of innovation coming to life? Well, I've spent all my career in healthcare. In some respects, you could say that healthcare is one of the most innovative industries, right alongside information technology. Just think of the groundbreaking accomplishments like the effective treatment for AIDS, once considered a death sentence, Today, most people with AIDS can be safely treated with medication. Or think about the remarkable teams of scientists who have mapped the human genome, or the huge gains we've made in the detecting and treating cancer. Or in my own field, eye health, we've seen amazing progress. We are now restoring sight to people who would have gone blind just 50 years ago. So just like information technology, healthcare, and medical research continue to attract some of the most talented and visionary people in the world. Unfortunately, that's where the comparison ends today. When most people think about the healthcare industry, they don't think about fast-moving change. Have you ever waited for hours in a hospital emergency room or spent months trying to get an appointment with a doctor? Then you would know exactly what I mean. My father is a doctor, and I'll bet from a patient's perspective, healthcare has remained largely unchanged since my father practiced in the 70s and 80s. By most accounts, doctors' offices look the same as they did back then. In fact, you may just find some of the same magazines there as well. The experience of finding a doctor, making an appointment, and sitting in a waiting room where you then have to pay on a fee-for-service basis has remained largely unchanged for decades. True, you do see more doctors and nurses using iPads, but the actual doctor-patient interaction has largely remained unchanged. So we've seen great strides in medical research. Healthcare delivery hasn't kept up with the wave of innovation that we've experienced in other industries like information technology. This gap between research and healthcare delivery is one of the great paradoxes of healthcare innovation. So much talent and vision and so much need, and yet often behind in bringing innovation to market for the benefit of patients. So what explains this innovation gap between research and delivery in healthcare? I go back to the formula. Talent plus culture plus incentives equals innovation. As I said, you'll find as much talent in healthcare as you would in any other industry. And from the doctors to the nurses to those doing research in the lab, we find some of the most talented and dedicated people in the world. But the culture and incentives, frankly, remain stubbornly stuck in the past. Look at Silicon Valley. The culture in Silicon Valley is built around speed, openness, and sharing. The incentives are transparent. Silicon Valley rewards and recognizes failure as simply part of the culture of innovation. The results speak for themselves. In the healthcare ecosystem, I'm sorry to report, we see the exact opposite. Perverse incentives have built up over decades, along with a Byzantine system of laws, rules, and regulations. The special nature of healthcare requires appropriate caution, of course, but for the field rooted in experimentation, we've become an industry with distorted incentives and overly complex rules and regulation. This has created a dangerously conservative culture and in an industry that has become resistant to change. We tend to look at inputs rather than results, and this in an industry where results matter most. So how do we make sense of this? Let me start by breaking it down into 3 areas where skewed incentives are the biggest problem: individuals, providers, and of course companies. And as head of a global company with operations in more than 100 countries, I can tell you that many other parts of the world are either more or less innovative in the U.S. when it comes to healthcare. But for the purposes of today's talk, I will focus on the U.S. healthcare system only. Until very recently, individuals actually had very few incentives to get healthy. The healthcare system treated everyone basically the same, whether you were a marathon runner or a 3-pack-a-day smoker. Doctors and insurance companies charged you the same. So did the employers who foot the bill. No one was really being held accountable for their own health. But individual behavior is one of the largest drivers of healthcare costs in the United States. Up to 75% of the $2.5 trillion we spend on healthcare every year in this country is spent on treating preventable conditions. Poor diet, smoking, alcohol, and failing to see a doctor regularly are all at the heart of the healthcare spending problem. The good news is these bad incentives are starting to change. Over the last few years, a radical new concept has worked its way into our vocabulary. It's called wellness. By now, wellness is a word we're all familiar with. But as recently as a decade ago, it was almost unknown of in the healthcare field. The painful reality of sharply increasing healthcare costs is forcing a change in the incentives for individuals to be responsible for their own health. And this change in incentives is causing a change in the culture of healthcare. We are now seeing employers take real steps to help their employees change their behavior and get well. Employers are offering smoking cessation classes and nutrition consulting. Some are putting healthcare clinics and fitness centers right in the corporate headquarters or factory, while removing unhealthy foods from their cafeteria. Employers are monitoring diabetes patients to make sure they stay compliant with their insulin regime. Employers and insurers are starting to get innovative with the way they think about individual health. They are using incentives to foster a culture of personal accountability and wellness. We are now seeing an environment where innovation is not only possible, but necessary. In fact, one of the more hopeful aspects of the new Affordable Care Act is how much innovation it allows by encouraging employers to tie healthcare benefits to healthy outcomes. Federal law used to severely limit what employers could do to build incentives into a healthcare plan. Under the new Affordable Care Act, 50% of the premium payment can go to programs to offer employees an incentive to be healthy, such as meeting a cholesterol target or attending a smoking cessation class. At Bausch Lomb, we are asking ourselves the very same question. What can we do to encourage our employees to invest in their own well-being? So by way of example, we started something called the Preventative Care Time Policy. We give our employees 8 paid hours every year to go to the doctor, get a checkup, a mammogram, or a colonoscopy, all without sacrificing any vacation time. Sounds simple, but in dealing with thousands of employees, this is a huge issue. It made us realize that our human resource can contribute to innovation every bit as much as our research and development. And starting next year, we will increase the incentives we offer employees not to smoke. We will charge lower health care premiums and offer higher life insurance coverage to non-smokers. Programs like our Preventative Care Time Policy that mix the right incentives with the right culture create a healthier workplace and reduce costs for both the employer and the overall healthcare system. The truth is that creating a formula for innovation for individual health isn't all that hard. It's about creating the right incentives for personal accountability. But that's not the whole story. The bigger challenge is bringing innovation to the insurance companies, the doctors, the hospitals, and administrators that are the foundation of our provider industry. Today, 95% of all healthcare providers still operate in a fee-for-service environment. Think of what that does to both culture and incentives. Doctors and hospitals are still compensated based on the frequency of visits and the number of services provided. The healthcare business model is primarily based on volume rather than results. Every doctor I know and every healthcare practitioner cares deeply about their patient's outcome, but the financial incentives fail to reward innovation in areas such as holistic care. The incentives and culture that drive our current healthcare system largely discourage innovation and reinforce the status quo. This can be very frustrating. How can we create a culture of innovation in a system that doesn't provide incentives to change? Here, I think the information technology revolution will help drive the kind of change the status quo simply cannot resist. This is something that the federal government is even starting to agree with. The government, in fact, recently launched a groundbreaking program that gives doctors and hospitals a financial incentive to use electronic medical records. This change is long overdue. But why do I think financial incentives to use electronic medical records will create more innovation in the healthcare environment? It's because it will give doctors access to information about patients in a new and more holistic way. Just think about how a doctor checks a patient's chart today. It's essentially an assessment of just one doctor's interaction with a patient. almost a cottage industry with an individual doctor and hospital operating very independently from one another. But now, thanks to the advances in information technology, we have the ability to store, analyze, and protect patient data in ways that we were once thought impossible. In fact, for a few $1,000s, a small doctor's office can have the same data capability only a Fortune 500 company could have afforded just a decade ago. Having better and more accessible data will give doctors and healthcare professionals the ability to treat their patients in ways that are almost unimaginable today, perhaps leading to more effective and efficient care. That's why the adoption of electronic medical records may be the single biggest incentive to move away from episodic treatment to a broader continuum of care. This is a dramatic cultural shift for the practice of medicine, but it will also create an environment where we have the ability to understand, treat, and diagnose illness in far more creative and preventative ways. I'll give you a concrete example where this is already happening. At Bausch Lomb, we have partnered with Aetna in a pilot called patient-centered medical homes. The idea is to share information and coordinate care among every single healthcare provider and, with whom a patient will interact: primary care doctors, specialists, pharmaceuticals, pharmacists, labs, and the hospitals. The goal is to give one practice the responsibility for the patient's total care experience. Instead of a fragmented set of doctor interactions, personal care becomes the ongoing complete look at the patient. Instead of asking, how many patients did I see today, doctors and nurses can take the data and ask a much different question. How can we improve the patient's outcome and limit their trips to the doctor or to the emergency room? Simple change, huge implications. By re-engineering the long-established fee-for-service system that rewarded doctors for the number of patients they treat and moving instead to a system that rewards better outcomes, the culture of healthcare delivery will become more innovative. It really has no choice. So now, let me turn to the third group I mentioned earlier, the pharmaceutical and medical device companies. This is where you'd expect to see the most innovation in healthcare, and often you would be right. The breakthroughs in healthcare I mentioned earlier are nothing short of revolutionary. But for the most part, incentives in the pharmaceutical and medical device industry have been geared toward blockbuster treatment and devices. Big pharmaceutical companies, where I cut my teeth, have long followed a high-risk, high-reward formula. Companies allocated most of their investments to just a handful of products that could make or break their profitability. This has led to a roller coaster of some spectacular successes and some long periods of little innovation. The problem, again, comes down to incentives and culture. Blockbuster thinking is risky, especially when the low-hanging fruit has been picked. Blockbuster thinking squanders the potential for growth that the industry's talent surely could produce if they had the right incentives and culture. That's why when it comes to innovation, healthcare has not kept pace recently with the information technology industry. When I arrived at Bausch Lomb, I joined an iconic company, nearly 160 years old, with terrific and talented people around the world. But despite having a rich legacy of innovation, we weren't keeping pace. And we weren't keeping pace because we had issues with our cultures and we had misguided incentives. We were doing many things right, but the focus of our reward system at Bausch Lomb in research and development was about writing papers and filing patents. We were putting in-house research above all else. The model led to lots of papers and lots of publications, but it was not producing the products that our patients needed. In many ways, Bausch Lomb was following the classic model of research and development, or R&D. A lot of emphasis on the R part, but not so much on the D. The problem was execution. We simply weren't getting enough new products out the door and into the hands of our patients. To cite one example, when I arrived at Bausch Lomb, we hadn't developed a new contact lens material in over a decade. This despite the fact that the typical innovation cycle in this space for new materials is 4 to 5 years. Although we had very talented scientists, I quickly realized we needed to change both the incentives and the culture. So we made a simple move with huge implications. Instead of thinking about research and development, or R&D, we started to talking about it as development and research, or D&R. Research shouldn't drive development. Instead, we believe it should be the other way around. Product development and patient needs should drive research. We also saw a lot of promising projects that never got off the ground, but also never quite died. Why? Because for many research scientists, a project in the pipeline equals job security. Researchers were incentivized to toil away on projects that had little or no chance of becoming products. And so we decided to make another simple but powerful change. We started to reward people just as much for killing a project as we did for bringing one to market. That shift required more than just new incentives. It also meant an entirely new way of thinking, something we call patient-centered product flow at Bausch Lomb. As the name implies, patient-centered product flow puts the focus on the patient and aligns all the resources around a common goal, developing products that benefit patients. This is what it means to change a culture inside a company. At Bausch Lomb, we recognize that innovation doesn't just happen in our labs. We bring creative, open culture to manufacturing, sales, and marketing as well. Make no mistake, that kind of culture change is not easy. Most companies, understandably, are skeptical about anything that isn't invented here. But we wanted to replace that old-fashioned mindset at Bausch Lomb with a new idea, invented anywhere. So we encourage our teams to scour the globe for new ideas and innovations that we can develop into real products. Whether by new partnerships, acquisitions, or licensing, we make sure that our scientists have lots of ways to bring a product to market quickly. I know that what I'm talking about doesn't sound nearly as revolutionary as what you may hear every day from a Google or Apple, but I think the results speak for themselves. Today, Bausch & Lomb's innovation pipeline is the strongest it's ever been in our nearly 160-year history. So let me assure you, this is the stuff that allows innovation to flourish in any company, not just at Bausch & Lomb. And in healthcare, to be candid, the stakes are much higher. That's why innovation in healthcare is so important to our society. When I visit Silicon Valley, I'm amazed not only by the products, but by the culture, the openness, the internal competition, the speed of getting products to market, and the boldness to invest in promising innovations that customers care about. A new culture of innovation is coming quickly to healthcare, and it is about time. I see it in my own field, eye health. In recent years, there's been incredible innovation in eye care, and we're just seeing the very tip of the iceberg. We're in the cusp of a number of breakthroughs that will dramatically change people's lives in meaningful ways. We now can do the most complex part of cataract surgery with a laser. Over the next few years, you will start seeing things like contact lenses that not only correct people's vision, but deliver medication directly to the body. We also believe that cures are within reach for terrible diseases like glaucoma and macular degeneration. These are huge innovations, and we will achieve them by applying our basic but powerful formula. For the students that are in the room here today, you will interview with lots of companies when you graduate that talk about innovation. Some of those will point to promising research. Some will have a breakthrough product or service. Some will even have designated innovation teams. And some companies will have an appointed chief innovation officer. But in my experience, innovation is the direct result of the formula I outlined at the beginning: talent plus culture plus incentives. That's what you should look for. That's the formula that we've put in place at Bausch & Lomb. And that's the best way to transform our healthcare ecosystem. If the talent plus culture plus incentives formula is embraced across all of the healthcare system, the next decade of healthcare could well be its most promising. As a CEO and an industry veteran in healthcare, and someone who is fascinated by innovation, I can't imagine a better place to be. I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Brett. So we'll take questions, keep the questions short so we can get as many in as possible. And we'll wait for the mic, okay? So.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I was really intrigued by your information-centeredness with the Aetna pilot that you were doing. I'm one that likes to take very good control of my health care. And what I loved about the idea was the nature of all the information coming together. But what I had a problem with, and I'd like you to talk me through this one, is how it kind of took the accountability away from the patient to that one center. And my thought was, what if that one center isn't where I really want to be next year? And, what are the ramifications of all that?
Yeah, so the idea of a patient-centered medical home is not to take the accountability away from the patient. In fact, it's just the opposite. I think what you want to look at is continuing to have very deep incentives to encourage wellness and an individual accountability for your health. And I think the patient-centered medical home is really about the coordination of care. And so what electronic medical records are going to ultimately allow individuals to do is take their care or allow their care to be very portable because you're going to have everything on a microchip, or it's going to be able to be put into a system and picked up by another provider. So, I recently had back surgery, so that's why I'm a little tender up here. So, I could take I had it done out here at Summit at an Overlook Hospital, but if I decided to go to the hospital for special surgery in the future, hopefully they'll be able to just access the whole chart from the hospital and the doctor here in Summit, New Jersey, without me having to request all these paper records flying all over the place.
You talked briefly about Silicon Valley and how excited you were with the entrepreneurship that was happening out there. There's a lot of great companies here, Silicon Alley, and even in New Jersey. What have you done at Bausch Lomb to kind of foster entrepreneurship and partner with local entrepreneurs that have great ideas that can partner with great big businesses?
Yeah, so we are very open-minded to partnering with entrepreneurs. In fact, a lot of our research project comes from small companies, some in New Jersey, some in California, and some scattered around the globe. So we keep a very open mind. We've incentivized our teams to look for outside innovation as much as you would for internal innovation. And so I think in many ways we're agnostic really towards in-house or outside innovation. And I think one of the things you have to look for is where does that innovation come from? And then develop those relationships and really get in early with some of these innovative companies. And sometimes we're providing equity investments. Sometimes we're just consulting with them on how they can get started, what the regulatory framework may be so that in the early days they make their products in the right way so that they can see the light of day. Because many times in our space, particularly in healthcare where we have so many rules and regulations, people come up with great ideas, but the ability to bring that to market because of the way they started is 10, 15 years away because of regulatory complexity or not getting the right data at the right time. And so those are the types of things we work with companies all the time and really, really try to encourage external innovation as well.
You talked about the changes that need to come to the primary care physician's office, and I was wondering what you thought of an innovative restructuring along the following lines. That is, things that are easy to diagnose and treat, like strep throat or getting your flu shot, that all moves to minute clinics and to chain pharmacies. Things like chronic care diseases, congestive heart failure, diabetes, they move to per member per month, so you only get paid on outcomes, keeping people out of the hospital or at the right cholesterol levels. Then what's left for the primary care physician is two things. The first one, those things are complicated to diagnose and treat, and things that used to be done by specialists that could now be done in the physician office because the technology can now be affordable in the physician's office, or the techniques are now such that they can be done by primary care physicians.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely what's going to happen. I think you're going to see people practicing to the very edge of their degrees, and so you're going to see nurse practitioners, and you're going to see physician assistants and others taking on more of the primary care responsibility for patients. I think that's going to happen for a variety of reasons. One, there are going to be incentives to do that. I think two, we're not going to have enough primary care doctors at the rate we're going to treat the population. And so we're going to need to create more innovative ways to treat patients. And I think third, as I had mentioned in the talk, data. So what will happen is, I think today, is if you go to a Minute Clinic to get treated, your primary care doctor, or if you have diabetes, the person caring for you for that disease isn't aware, it's all disparate, uncoordinated care today. But if we can get that electronic medical record and that data can be seamlessly shared between all the providers, that will also facilitate, I think, that type of environment. So I think it's just a matter of time.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting talk. With your advocacy for the electronic medical records being portable and what you're doing to coordinate care at B&L, how do you propose addressing the privacy issues that might arise on the part of employers who might potentially discriminate against employees with serious diseases that could potentially cost the company thousands of dollars in premiums to treat them?
Yeah, I think that is one of the obstacles to the electronic medical record. So we're not going to, as a society, ever get to a really robust use of electronic medical records till we can make sure that we can protect them. And so I think that, we certainly have that ability today. We know how to protect very sensitive data. It's a question about bringing it mainstream and getting it to not be cost prohibitive to do. And I think we're on the cusp of doing that, but clearly not my area of expertise. I'm not an IT person, but I've been to many seminars where some of the leading experts have spoken to this topic, and we're really right at the edge of being able to crack that code. And I think lastly, discriminating against people for health conditions already is illegal, but we've got to make sure that we enforce those rules and deal with it.
Good morning. With a generation of students, both undergraduate and graduate, who look at entrepreneurship and starting their own business as the most exciting, how do you attract the best young talent and let them know that in some of these foundational companies that at one time were small startups, how do you attract them to bring their minds and their energy and their creative thinking, since that might be a career they're better suited to than starting yet another company in someone's basement?
Yeah, I think it's a particularly difficult challenge. When you have a young, talented person today that has that entrepreneurial bug, I'm not sure that they want to be in a big company. I think those are the types of people you want to partner with and let them build their products. Sometimes, they do come inside, and you need to create the right culture, the right environment for them to work in. And so you have to adapt your culture and the way you run your business for the talent in which you have. So for example, we have an office in Orange County, California, where we make a lot of our surgical equipment, implants and the like. And in that office, for example, our dress policy is vastly different than it is in Rochester. And that's on purpose. We want people to feel comfortable. We want to attract the talent and the people that don't want to come to work dressed like this. And that's a big part of it. But it's not the end all. If you really have that bug to be an entrepreneur in your heart, and that's what you're committed to doing, we'd rather have you as a partner than an employee.
I'm just wondering, when you're talking about outsourcing research, I'm wondering what role will universities play in this new shift? And are you currently partnering with any universities as far as research and development?
We are. I think universities will play a vital role in this. I think there's a huge opportunity for universities to really step up and fill that void of basic research. I think the university environment is among the best places for that basic research to happen, and ultimately, find a way to commercialize that. So I think two things about that. One is the universities need to create an environment to foster that type of activity. And second, I think we were talking about bureaucracy. Many universities have a hard time figuring out how to appropriately commercialize their activities. It's not just, it's part of, their nonprofit organizations generally. It's not part of the way they think. It's not comfortable for them to do that. And so we find that the universities that tend to have processes for technology transfer really work very quickly instead of slowly in dealing with these technologies or innovations that are coming out of their labs in their universities tend to do it well. And yes, we are partnering. So one we just announced by way of example is with Bascom Palmer Eye Hospital in Miami. For those that don't know, Bascom Palmer has, for the last, 25 plus years, been the #1 eye hospital in the world. And we recently just announced a research collaboration with them where they set up an incubator because they knew the bureaucracy of the university was going to be very difficult for them to deal with, but yet they had so much talent and so many great projects that should be commercialized to help patients. And so we found a mechanism for doing that with them that so far has worked pretty well, although it's very early days.
Brent, you've worked in mid-size and large and very large corporations. You've worked in public and private corporations. Any observations on the differences in driving change in one versus the other? And any advice to large public corporations that might take learnings from that?
Yeah, I think I'll steal the Nike slogan, but it's just about doing it. You can talk about the change that your company needs, regardless of size. A good example, not McKinsey, but other consulting firms will come and tell us we should do X, Y, and Z. This is the latest, greatest, philosophy on management. And I'll simply ask them, do you do this in your firm? And they'll generally say no. So, you can give out the answer. It's very easy. All right, that's a lot of work. I know that. I should have done something. But it's a lot of work. But, the hard part is actually just doing it. And so, a good example is diversity, a very important initiative inside of Bausch Lomb. And we were talking about it with our HR folks, and they wanted to join all sorts of organizations, and they wanted to have all sorts of lectures on the importance of diversity. And I turned to our head of HR and I said, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just say, instead of joining all these groups and speeches and everything else, why don't we just make it a mandatory requirement that every external search that we do have a diverse slate of candidates? And I will tell you, the statistics show if you have a diverse slate of candidates for every job offering you have, 70% of the hires will be diverse. And so you don't need all the fancy stuff, you just got to do it. And so, I think at some point you have to have the courage as a leader to face change, because I will tell you, it is unpopular. You will get a lot of naysayers. You'll get a lot of people that say you're sticking your neck out too far. Why are you taking that risk? And the reality is, it's not just one person. It's the entire, team at Bausch Lomb. Every employee that has to embrace change and be willing to take ownership and accountability for our company to make it better every day. Not just once, not just as a project one time, but every day. And that's really, I think, the same message regardless of the size of the company.
Thank you, Brent. That was a great talk. I know we have to keep you moving, so I'm going to ask you to come off the stage, and I'll just, for a photo, with our sponsors. So.